All right, so welcome everyone to the Prairie Women's Panel. We've got a really great set of discussion topics coming up, and we've got lots of guests representing all the different cities. So we've got representing Calgary, we've got Terri Whitehead, you can just kind of wave maybe. We've got Erin McKinlay from Winnipeg. And then we've got Robyn, Bosnyak, and Lindsay Monderman from Edmonton. And then we've got Gia and Bobbi from, I guess, Regina and Saskatoon, representing both cities. Awesome, great. So how we'll start the discussion is we're gonna have the presenters speak a little bit about some of the initiatives they're running in their own communities and experiences they've had, positive and negative challenges with these initiatives. And then we wanna make sure we reserve a good chunk of the discussion today to questions. So there is a chat. Feel free to type your questions into the chat, and then I'll kind of read them out. As well, we kind of have a more general discussion in the second half. Even if there's no questions, we'll have some topics, and then it'll be a little bit more of a free-form discussion. All right, so let's have Terri take it away with our first topic.
Snap, first up, hey? Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try to share a screen here.
Perfect.
Success?
Yes, success.
Perfect, okay. Perfect. So just a quick couple seconds about me. So I'm representing Calgary today. I was born and raised in Calgary and have sort of entered my ultimate experience career, started kind of around university age. So I was kind of a multi-sport kid up until then. And since then, I have played, I calculated up, over 15 years now in Calgary, through like a local league player through to now. I've done a couple of stints on the national team as a player, and then also in Calgary, a coach, a team captain, and now for the last 5 years, my job has been, full-time job has been as executive director of Calgary Ultimate. So kind of bringing all those experiences into a little bit of what I'm talking about today. However, I do want to stress that like everything that I talk about today is the work of a ton of people and a ton of ladies, guys, everyone in Calgary. So I'm just the messenger today for all that good work. So the women's sort of initiative that we wanted to talk about today from the Calgary perspective was the formation of our women's committee recently. So basically, over the last few years, for a number of reasons, whether it was looking at numbers, people aging out, the creation of more club teams, and the need for more female athletes, we kind of, I think a lot of people recognized the need for more women's players, more women's opportunities, how we could develop ladies, all those good things. So this diagram kind of just shows a very rough model of kind of how we're all spaced out and organized, with kind of each pink dot being, say an interested person that was starting to plan an event or had women's ultimate things on their mind. The main thing being that was kind of, as people started planning events, what we were seeing was a pretty scattershot, more and more events were happening, but what ends up kind of happening is a couple of them are collaborative, a couple of them ended up overlapping in the calendar. All of a sudden you'd learn that a few groups had planned winter events, and so people were spread thin. And so we kind of all just were starting to feel like, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It all comes from the best of intentions, but could we do it better? Like, is there can we do this efficiently? We're obviously resource limited. How could we go about that? Which sparked in November of 2018, kind of pulling everyone together for an open meeting to discuss what we thought was the best structure and method for, could we bring people together under a more organized fashion? Did we want that? In addition, then going to the next step, well, we had everyone in a room, could we brainstorm and generate ideas for those things? And then I think quite important out of that was, actually get some names to paper to action that stuff. So get some volunteers, assigned to some specific things so that we would hopefully not just have a meeting that didn't go anywhere, but action some things out of that. And then finally, just a sharing, like an open collaborative, like what does your group, whoever you're associated with, be that league, be that a club team, the juniors program, like what are your plans for the year, kind of give everyone a space to share, make everyone feel included and welcome, which I think was important to set that stage that no one group was trying to kind of take over and force it one way or the other. It was like truly this will work if everyone understands the why and everyone kind of buys in. And even if you don't, fully agree on the path, you kind of understood where it came from and then could get behind it. This is not what the meeting looked like. The meeting was just in a regular boardroom, but this slide was boring otherwise. So this is from one of our events that later happened, one of our 4-on-4 women's events. So at that November meeting, we sort of laid out what we felt were the options and kind of felt like they ran on the spectrum. You can ignore a lot of the pros and cons text unless you want to look at it later in the recording. But really, like a Calgary women's group could form a totally separate society, like a not-for-profit, a group. The pro, you've got that autonomy. It's more formalized, same as any other non-for-profit. Cons, obviously, that's quite an undertaking. As someone who, runs the Calgary Ultimate one and didn't even have to get it going from scratch, that comes with a lot of responsibility and extra annual workload. And then the second option was to kind of wrap a committee under the umbrella of Calgary Ultimate. So Calgary Ultimate being the local league. And kind of with that, the pro being that Calgary Ultimate also valued a lot of these things, and was already talking about had already taken some steps to form actually a full diversity committee that was going to look at everything through like gender and, race and women in Ultimate, like all those things. But a great start would be the Women in Ultimate group. Another pro being you kind of can now leverage all the administrative pieces of the CUA, our insurance, our bank account, those kinds of things. Cons, obviously, just being that everyone has to be kind of willing as soon as it falls under Calgary Ultimate. We already have a board and a leadership group. The things we do have to align with our mission and vision. And there's also definitely some reporting and accountability pieces that come with that. It can't be just super casual all the time. And then at the other end of the spectrum, kind of continuing ad hoc, less work administratively, obviously. It gave people and teams the freedom to do what they want when they want. But again, we were starting to find that, the cons being that we were sort of questioning whether now the overlap and the inefficiencies of that were, starting to be counterproductive. And then also turnover, loss of consistency. One group or one person runs an event, those files end up on their computer and then they move or whatever, and then we don't have that anymore the next year. And also if we wanted to do any cool big collaborative things that require putting money or anything, insurance down up front, like who's carrying that risk? It's not something, is that something that individuals want to be and are in a capacity to be taking on? So at the end of all the discussion, our group did decide that middle of the road method was what we wanted to try to go for. And again, not to say that is going to work that's where everyone's going to land, I know other cities have gone the independent society route, but this is just what our group collectively felt was the best move at the time, and something we could then set a plan and like run down that path rather than kind of dabbling in all three of those paths. So the end result is that it took what originally looked like this, and we're trying to now shape it to look something more like that. So the Women's Committee falls under the banner of Calgary Ultimate, with, the administrative support of myself as executive director. Ideally we maintain a board member on that committee, and then as much representation as possible kind of out into those other groups, be it local league, juniors, and the club teams. And then again, on the kind of event side, we turn that bit of that scatter shot, hopefully, our ideal model, into something like this, which, a little more tighter. Am I actually muted? Still good? Thumbs up, Vicki? Perfect. Yeah, so that's what we were shooting for. Obviously lots of nuances to that. So I would say noteworthy successes, first year, 2019 in action. I was super impressed. I thought the committee did a great job. I would say it was a good level of active, which, from my perspective meant within the committee, meeting every 2 or 3 months. So hopefully not too much of a burden on any volunteers, but enough to kind of plan ahead, do that, 90-day burst, meet up again. I feel like the committee did a great job of casting the net wide during a meeting, talking about a lot of ideas, and then picking 1 or 2 and actioning them. So not getting carried away. Because again, I think we fall into that trap of trying to do 20 things, none of them happen, and you kind of lose momentum. The committee was really good at being we can't do everything, pick a couple, do them well. So I thought the calendar looked pretty tight. Oh, sorry, too much touching. Oh, now I've done it. 1 sec. Sorry. Another sort of innovative thing that I thought they did really well was incorporation of our junior ladies. So we actually had a couple junior members, they are our leaders of tomorrow, on the committee, and recognizing that as much as we were trying to establish committee membership for if any voting or anything came up, that the juniors are a bit more comfortable coming out as buddies, and they kind of need that flexibility. So we kind of allowed them a little bit more flexibility in attendance and membership. 2 of them could come, and it was a bit of a couple people out of a group of 3 or 4. And then again, a lot of the same pros that were already discussed in that chart, kind of foundationally stronger. You had a sucker executive director who now took care of the boring work, any of the finance reporting stuff, and the making sure our T's were crossed and our I's were dotted, and that's just part of the job, and hopefully the volunteers could focus on the fun stuff. And then again, recognizing that we couldn't do everything, so kind of targeting recruitment, retention, and that beginner intermediate level for the first year, knowing that at the competitive level, people are pretty passionate. Some of that will take care of itself in the meantime, while we build capacity and get rolling. Obviously, I'm not gonna say everything is perfect and we vaulted to massive success. I guess that graph on the previous page also showed we did get a few people that came out to our clinics following through. We could follow them through to see if they signed up for league, signed up for club teams. We're not talking massive numbers in the first year, but from someone who just kind of from a gut feel knows the numbers we're dealing with, I still deem it a success, and it's got to start somewhere. Balancing kind of open to all versus niche events. As soon as people get to a developmental level or a competitive level, it's sometimes tough. You don't want every event to be open to everybody. Sometimes we want some competitive targeted events, something targeted to your particular skill level. So really working to increase numbers, which is tough in a small Prairie city community, so that you can get that parsing out of those groups, and not have each group only have such a small number. And then, in the meantime, I think we really need to work on a culture of recognizing we are a small community, and that does mean every event might not be specifically honed to your, skill and experience level, and that everyone's going to kind of have to take away from it what they can get. As I have come up through the Calgary League system or whatever, sometimes it means going to an event and getting the most out of it, challenging yourself to find in an intermediate group a way to challenge yourself to work on a skill. We also still want club teams to have autonomy and do their own events. Teams want to do events for fundraising or events that are specific for their team, and so we want to kind of balance not always forcing every club team to do to sacrifice, to blur the lines, everyone is an independent team and needs a bit of that. So we're working on kind of everyone wearing their multiple hats and balancing that. And then obviously fine tuning the admin pieces. As soon as you run through an organization where you have to report and things, it just slows things down a little bit. So that's a bit more up to, say, the league to try and keep that efficient, but work on that communication flow and all those good things. Vicki, do you want me, I have a brief thing on the weekend events that'll take like a couple minutes, or I can just pass it off right now?
Sure, maybe just mention a couple of the things that came out of the committee discussions, and yeah, and also like what you're happening in this weekend.
Sure. So I mean, this is kind of just pulls one specific event out of the list of things that the committee tackled. And basically it's a weekend, spring, sort of March or April training camp weekend that started this What camp in 2014, 2015 was actually in Moose Jaw, run by Renee in Saskatchewan. And then it kind of, right when she wrapped up, an event cropped up, Women Who Frisbee in Calgary, that's run for a number of years. Each year it's kind of evolved a little bit, which wasn't worth getting into, but the takeaways from all that, I think, are that for a Prairie community is that I think it's a great base model, and that springtime is like a pretty good, pre-league for anyone new, pre-club season for any competitive players. But keeping in mind, like the times we've tried this something for everyone approach, a whole event that's got tiered events is like maybe running its course, we're finding. And that's just a difference that we're finding in like target audience, that one size doesn't fit all. Again, I don't have to go through all this, but basically, beginners, we're finding, they're not going to drive to Moose Jaw for a weekend. They, for them, maybe that 3-hour event in Calgary is the move, versus on the advanced side, maybe we are pooling Edmonton, Regina, Winnipeg, Saskatoon, Calgary, hit them all, to get that over that threshold of competitive numbers to have a really good weekend event. And then each individual city will have to run their own beginner events. On the coaching side, at the beginner level, you kind of more need the personality types that are going to make it fun. The specific qualifications aren't quite as important. Whereas at the experience level, we found that, there's a minimum coaching level before people no longer think it's for them. Which is a challenge in the Prairies when we, don't have a huge coaching pool or a huge elite player pool yet. And those players still tend to be playing. So working towards building that program in the Prairies, and maybe that's in this day and age with Zoom and used to be ease of travel, bringing in coaches. And then again, sort of beginner level, the ability to keep it social, keep it fun, come with a buddy, that security. This year we had modeled a form where the intermediate clinic was a little bit longer and the beginner one was a bit shorter, but that meant people could come together, still be in the same spot, overlapping in time, those kinds of considerations. So it's definitely like finessing over time, and always happy to share more of like any of those learnings.
And I think what's really great about an event like this is kind of seeing leaders getting to know each other too, right? Because we're all doing pockets of different things, and to realize that, we can adopt some of the strategies up here in Edmonton that have worked for you in Calgary, or vice versa. And it just saves everyone a lot of time because we're all dealing with the same challenges often.
For sure.
Great. And we're good. Moving on.
Sounds good. Do you want me to do the fast and female bit at the end? Seems more like.
Yeah, because then it's kind of like a call out for folks to volunteer and help out. Perfect. Good. So Erin, if you have anything to share, feel free to, I think you can click share screen, or if you prefer to just speak, that's great. So I'd like to introduce Erin McKinlay from Winnipeg. So kind of a good segue, the Winnipeg community has had a women's committee for a while. So it's sort of the next evolution of where Calgary may find itself in a couple of years, and the kind of programs that would come out of a women's committee. So take it away, Erin.
For sure. I hope everyone can you hear me? My computer froze a bit, but I might be good. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk about the Women's Development Committee that we have going on here in Winnipeg. Vicki gave us a great intro. I'm just going to quickly talk about what we do, who we are, and how we got to where we are. And through that, I'm going to focus on how we developed as a community. Terry's talk was so interesting because it's how we were, and we've had a committee since I wasn't even on the first committee. We've had a committee since I'd say 18, 20 years. There's always been some group of women planning programming in Winnipeg. So it's interesting to see the contrast. So what we do right now, we manage the indoor winter leagues. We have a 4-team development league, an 8-team intermediate league, and a 4-team advanced league. That's all separate from the women's competitive league that also has a 4-team league in the city. We also focus on leadership development, mostly through making sure people get chances to captain within those leagues at different levels. And we're trying to move towards more coach training. We also offer skills clinics, rules clinics, things like that. They're kind of intermittent and mixed around right now, just based on what the needs are. We also advocate for women's opportunities. So we work with mods and the mods board to advocate for all of the women's activities. Also, our committee has reps from everywhere, which allows everyone to collaborate together from all of the different aspects of women's, like touring, mixed league, rep, competitive, juniors, all of that. So the committee kind of allows us a collaboration space. So who we are. Currently, the committee consists of approximately 14, 15 ladies. Within those committee members, we have 2 league coordinators, or we have league coordinators, 2 ladies for each league, so 2 development intermediate coordinators and 2 advanced league coordinators, 2 committee chairs, and then we have reps from the different areas. So we have a couple reps from the women's competitive league, from touring, and from juniors. Also, our members fill roles on other mods boards. So we also sit a member on the communications committee and the fields committee, just to make sure that the women's voice is heard on the other committees that are run by mods. So how did we get here? So like I said, I didn't start as the committee lead on the original committee, but I was recruited from playing in the league. And when I started, we had a 10-team league. It may have been 8, but I feel like it was 10. But we had a 10-team league, and we played out of a gym. So eventually what happened is the soccer complex at the University of Manitoba opened, and it opened up spots for us to have Ultimate in there. And not just us, but all of Ultimate, so mixed league as well. We advocated with mods to get the for women's to get a spot. We were very successful. Our league was filling, people were interested in it. But what we specifically advocated for was having a time frame that met our demographic. So not too late and consistent. League times were kind of all over the place, with sometimes at 10:30, sometimes on a Tuesday. So we advocated for Sunday at 6:30. We got all 4 fields for an 8-team league, and that's been very successful. At this time, the women's committee still looks like 4 to 5 members, and the league committee chair was also the league coordinator. And we met maybe once, twice a year, mostly to make teams, because when people sign up for the leagues, they sign up individually, and then we make even teams. From there, that 8-team league got really popular. It went from just barely not being able to fill when we started, to filling within a couple days of registration opening, to filling within an hour, to filling within minutes of opening. So ladies will literally set their clocks so that they can get into this league, and it was filling within 10 minutes. We would crash the servers, so it was becoming very popular. So at this point, we kind of started to look at other options, clinics, rules. We started an outdoor kind of clinic series, which didn't go as well because our outdoor program here in Winnipeg is really involved. It's 4 days a week of mixed leagues. So lots of the ladies that were playing in the winter would play with their partners or friends in the summer. So we kind of dropped that and moved towards expanding the indoor league. So as we're advocating for space, we got some space at the University of Winnipeg last minute to open another 4-team league. The problem was that we got a Sunday time slot, which obviously we had trouble filling. And our ability to not fill that league made it look like people didn't want our programming to the mod staff and board. So we just continued to advocate like that it was the time slot and the last minuteness that was kind of halting our growth, not necessarily that people weren't interested. But as the leagues grew, at the same time, an independent intermediate league had started up. And there was also a women's competitive league that happened Thursday evenings at the same time both of those were separate from what the women's committee ran. So after we got that time slot, we kind of realized that our committee, and the committee's starting to grow. I think at this point we had 6 or 8 people. And as we keep moving forward, we're realizing that this is more work than for one person to coordinate all of these leagues. So we got together and we restructured the league. We also were able to bring in the intermediate league under our umbrella. So whoever was running it was kind of like, it's too much. Can you guys take it on? And we're like, yeah, we have 8 people that are willing to help and we can combine it with our other stuff. So at this point, we got together and we restructured the committee to having a chair and league coordinators separate. And we made sure to make that there was 2 in each position for 3 reasons. So having 2 chairs or 2 league committee members means that if someone's away, things still happen. Also, if someone has to leave because of pregnancy, they're moving, they got a new job, there's no guilt there and the league doesn't fall apart because there's already someone in place. So it ideally would always be a veteran or someone that's been running the league with someone who's new, so that cycle and corporate knowledge never gets lost and we just continue to build instead of having to rebuild. So getting that intermediate league, we were able to get a time slot that was effective at the University of Winnipeg on Mondays at a consistent time, which made it easy and it was always full. So our continued advocating for space, because our Sunday league is still filling up in like minutes. So to continue, at one point actually, we did let's see how many people are getting waitlisted, and it was over 50 people that were getting waitlisted for the league. So we were able to prove that we had a need for this, and our continuous advocating for field space kind of led to some conflict with the board and mod staff, which ultimately was positive because that conflict led to us getting kind of more face time. So the 2 chairs at the time, myself and Jess Benoit, had a meeting with the president, and all of that communication led to us being involved more in policy planning and having a dedicated board member from the mods board on our committee at all of our stuff. So, and it got us in the door with the fields committee, which was who decides who gets what space, which was what we wanted. So it all ended up to work out in our favor. So at this point, our committee has been growing because the programming has been growing. So we're at about 10, 13 people on the committee now. And we've brought in the 2 coordinators from the Women's Competitive League now sit on the board. And we've started to get reps from all kinds of different places, coaches from high school, coaches from Team Manitoba. And a dedicated board member. Even if they switched, because the board changes every 2 years, we still had a dedicated board member. So what ended up happening from this is a last minute slot opened up at the North Winnipeg location, and we were able to put together a 4-team league with 1 week's notice because we had all of our resources together. This league wasn't full, because we put it together in a week, which also made it look like our programming wasn't viable, like people didn't want to be part of our programming, when in reality the problem was last minute space. We also were getting feedback at this time that not everyone wants to play, like the skill level across the Sunday Development League was too vast. Some people were getting ready to move to intermediate and we only had 4 teams there. So we switched our structure to a 4-team development league, an 8-team intermediate league, and a 4-team advanced league. So we also switched up how we were kind of around the board there for a bit. With the increased numbers, what we did for registration was we would have the advanced women would do a tryout. So we'd have a night where everyone could come and see, and then we would put everyone who we felt skill-wise would be able to compete there, and then then we opened registration for the other leagues up after that, which worked out great. And what we're moving towards now is we have the competitive league joining that tryout, so to make sure that everyone is getting into the league that they want and that matches their skill level. And that pretty much puts us to where we're at today. Our next steps were to evolve to outdoor, but as we know, we haven't gone outdoor yet. So it's kind of changed into we're running clinics twice a week. And that's kind of how we got to where we were. We still face some challenges. So some challenges we still face is just a lack of understanding of our population. So having when one of the leagues wasn't filling, a good example is when one of the leagues wasn't filling up because it was brand new and at the University of Winnipeg, we sent through our board member, we put together a proposal to have mods subsidize the league so that women didn't have to pay more than other people, because that was going to deter them more from joining our league if it was more expensive. So we put together a proposal, and it was given by our board member, and the mod staff was very defensive about it. And that just comes from just not understanding. It doesn't come from like being malicious or mean. They just didn't understand. So we still kind of face those just not understanding our perspectives. Also program expansion. We still are pretty full. We recently had a huge influx of the junior girls coming in. This comes from having a diverse committee. More programs are hearing about our women's programming and then coming over to a safe space where we've kind of set things up. So it's continuing to expand in a way that people understand. So finally, why I think we built a strong community. We've set up a safe space for people to play and to develop not only their skill, but their leadership potential. We try really hard to give as many leadership opportunities in kind of an environment where there can be some. There isn't necessarily the same kind of opportunities in mixed or touring or juniors. So if we can provide them here, it's just going to benefit them in their other programs. We advocate to provide opportunities, even when it's hard. There's been so many times where we know nobody's going to listen to us, but we just continue to advocate either to a board member, to the mod staff, to our community who can also advocate. So that's also one reason why I think we've been strong. It kind of leads to trust with our community. So our community trusts us as the committee to move what we need forward. We also are able to combine our resources. Bringing the intermediate league under like kind of our umbrella allowed more women to know what's out there. And then having a contact with the competitive league where they're still their own thing, but they are able to benefit from our knowledge and we're able to benefit from theirs, just allows more opportunities for the whole community. Also, we listen and we're flexible. So when we got feedback, for example, that, you know, development is kind of like more people are ready to advance, we changed around our league format. So we do lots of surveys. We listen to the captain's feedback. We listen to any of the informal feedback, whether it's a message on Facebook or whatever. So we listen to their feedback and we change our plans. And we communicate why we've changed. Hey, we're going to try this. Oh, we're going to go this way. We probably had 10 or 15 iterations of how we register for the leagues. And every time, like we've changed that many times based on like how it went and women and the girls' feedback. Yeah, and from here, we're just going to continue to do the same thing, continue to have a consistent board where there's room for movement, but we don't lose that corporate knowledge, and continue to listen to the community and change our programming as needed. The next steps are going to be outdoor and kind of some more leadership development and like coaching clinics. But that's pretty much where we're at in Winnipeg. I'm looking at my notes. I think that's all I have.
Great, that's perfect. And
Thanks.
and I was so happy. I'm from Winnipeg originally, so like I think your last try, I was able to attend, and it was just super great. Coming from Edmonton, where we don't have quite as large of a population of ultimate players, it's kind of, it's like hashtag future goals for us. So that's super exciting. Perfect.
Awesome.
So it was really great that you brought up kind of the topic of succession and leadership, and how even with regards to board members, knowing that people transition out and having that in place. So this is a really good to kind of segue into Robyn's chat. Is going to be a little bit less on the kind of overall broadening league organization and more, I guess, a personal kind of story with regards to succession planning and that transition as an individual player toward more of a leadership position. So Robyn, when you're ready, take it away.
Yeah, for sure. I don't have slides, so if Terri can keep her cool one up, that would be great. Yeah, so I was basically just going to talk a little bit about the history of Fleury, kind of some challenges that we face, some things that I think have worked well, kind of where we're going in the future. One thing I'll point out, I will fully admit that I personally have bounced around a lot between mixed and women's, which maybe gives me a unique perspective, but I will say I haven't played on Fleury from its inception. So just something to keep in mind. But I figured I would start maybe kind of with a brief history of Fleury. So Fleury was established in 2013, kind of prior to that in Edmonton. It was basically Rogue Hippo that was our competitive ultimate team, and that was a mixed team. So I think kind of like other speakers have mentioned, Edmonton, we definitely have a small ultimate community. We don't have a lot of, I mean, this is changing a little bit, but we generally don't have a huge influx of people coming into the city, which can feel a little cannibalistic sometimes, like you're just always within your same networks trying to get more people playing. So prior to 2013, it was kind of like if you wanted to play high level ultimate in Edmonton, you were playing on the mixed team, which was Rogue Hippo. So Fleury came along in 2013, and then I would say kind of a high watermark for the team was when we won bronze at CUC in 2016 in Edmonton, which was really exciting. That allowed us to get a bid to the Pan American Ultimate Championships in November of 2017, which for a lot of people, that was their first kind of like international competition. But then to kind of illustrate sort of the ups and downs that we've had, after that in 2018, Fleury wasn't even able to put together a team to go to nationals. So you can kind of see where we've had those ups and downs in our history. And there's obviously been a lot of contributing factors to that. I think, again, some of the challenges that we've faced, kind of going back to how we have a very small community, and I'm sure a lot of people in other prairie cities kind of feel the same, but our teams, all of our teams have kind of have generally grown and contracted and changed based on where nationals is that year, whether it's a qualifying year for Worlds, and it's kind of led to people picking their teams literally just based on the likelihood of going to CUC. So for example, in 2018, Fleury was kind of struggling to get players. The mixed team kind of had a better chance of going to CUC. So a lot of people just hopped onto the mixed team just to have a chance to go to nationals. And I think also too, just generally, we've seen like an explosion of teams in Edmonton, which has been really great. Like I said, kind of prior to 2013, it was really just that one mixed team that you could play on. Now we have a women's team and a men's team and a women's masters team and a men's masters team, which is really great. It provides a lot of playing opportunities, but it also leads to spreading that community really thin. So, and then what that also kind of sometimes leads to is some teams feeling like they get relegated to like a developmental level, that like, for example, the mixed team is the competitive team. And then if you don't make the mixed team, then the women's team is the development team, which hasn't always been true. But when you're kind of always when you're always vying for the same players, you're just spreading the teams really thin. What I will say though, I think some things that have really contributed to Fleury's success, and actually maybe I'll preface this by saying, similar to Terri, this is the work of a lot of people. So I'm going to talk about EUPA, so the Edmonton Ultimate Players Association, talk about our juniors program a bit, and there's a lot of people that have contributed to those things. So don't want to make it sound like I personally have been doing all this, or even just a few people on Fleury, because there's definitely a lot of people involved. But I think one of the biggest things that has started helping Fleury a lot is the development of that juniors program in Edmonton, which EUPA has put a lot of work into. So running clinics in schools, having youth leagues in the spring, having more youth tournaments, and I think also just on our end, we've really encouraged Fleury players to get to know the juniors, to reach out to them, so that there is that succession from juniors into women's. I would also say too, kind of similar to juniors, we've also really worked to keep ties with the University of Alberta Ultimate Team. Some people only start playing in university, so you might not have even met these people in league or elsewhere. And then there's a lot of great players that come onto that U of A club team. So we try to keep close ties with them. If they're hosting a tournament, we'll try to put a team in, that kind of thing. And then I'll talk about this later with our indoor league too, but also trying to encourage juniors into leadership positions early on. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but even just like, when I say leadership position, it's like getting them to call a line, like just like getting them to speak up and feel a little bit more comfortable leading a team or leading people on the field, that kind of thing. One other thing that, and again, this is a kind of a EUPA program that's had, I think, really good effects for Fleury. So prior to last year, I guess, EUPA had a touring team agreement that distributed funds to the various club teams, basically in exchange for helping run a EUPA tournament. Last year, they transitioned to the VIP program, which is the volunteer incentive program. Basically what that looked like was that club teams had to volunteer a certain amount of hours, or their respective players had to volunteer a certain amount of hours throughout the summer in order to get VIP points, which would then translate into funds that we would get from EUPA. I mean, I think we're still kind of working the kinks out a little bit, but I think overall it's really helped with club players, like Fleury players, going out and getting involved in EUPA and getting involved in the community, keeping tabs on leagues, on EUPA tournaments, so that you're going out there and you're talking to people. If you see someone on the field who you think has a lot of potential, you're right there to say like, hey, have you ever considered playing Club Ultimate? This is when we practice, here's our information, get in touch with us, kind of thing. And I think on the Fleury side too, we've also kind of gotten a lot more conscious, I would say, about encouraging our players to do that. So not just feeling like it's an obligation under this VIP program, but saying like, hey, you should go coach juniors. Like if you're available, if you have the time, go coach a juniors team, like get to know them, like give back to the community in that way. Play in the EUPA tournaments, play local tournaments if you want to. Go out and meet people, play mixed tournaments, you know, as long as it isn't substantially conflicting with Fleury activities. You know, don't just kind of stay within the club bubble, go like give back to EUPA, give back to other players. And then I think also too, I mean, hearing Erin talk about the Winnipeg League makes me kind of jealous, because kind of like Vicki was saying, this is totally where we would like to get this to. But a few years ago, Fleury and Throwback, which is the women's masters team, we started hosting an indoor women's league. So kind of from October to March sort of time. And that was intended to be complementary to the men's league that was going on at the same time. And it's again kind of gone through several different iterations. It's always kind of been a stats league, but the stats haven't always been super important. But I think, like Terri mentioned too, when you have such a small community, it's sort of that balancing what everyone is looking for, because we just don't have enough people. I mean, we don't have enough people to run different levels. It's kind of like we're scrounging for just enough to have the league. And then within that, you have literally brand new players all the way up to people who've been playing club for several years. And so it's kind of trying to find a way that everyone is happy, which can be very difficult sometimes. But I think Terri kind of hit the nail on the head when she said that, you know, sometimes you just kind of have to realize as a club player that there won't be that perfect event for you. Like, you kind of have to find a way to make it worthwhile for yourself, find a way that you can contribute. And I think one way that Fleury and Throwback have been doing that with this indoor women's league is just this last year, we had experienced players be coaches for their teams, player coaches, I guess. But they would always stay with that one team to, you know, talk about offense, kind of guide the team and what they were doing. So that's really helped a lot. And then going back to what I said about the juniors program, because we would have junior women play in this league as well, kind of again, like encouraging them to be leaders on the field, you know, speak up, call the line, say what we're doing on the next point or whatever. And yeah, and I think Terri mentioned this too, but having people sign up as buddies, like that's really important for getting new people in oftentimes, because they want to play with someone they know. And I guess I would just say, sort of going forward, I think we've suffered a little bit from burnout of our leadership or people in leadership. I think we've often had, you know, kind of the same people doing a lot of the same roles for the team. And I think something that's been really kind of that we've been really conscious of is kind of nurturing leadership from within the team. And again, not even in like a super complicated way, but even just if you see someone who you feel kind of wants to be more involved, being like, hey, can you book hotels for this tournament? Like even just the simple things of kind of getting people to understand those sort of administrative pieces, like registering for tournaments, booking hotels, getting people organized to get there. Things that are important, but you don't really think about until all of a sudden you don't have anyone to lead the team. So just kind of picking out those people that you feel kind of maybe want to contribute more and just getting them, kind of giving them those small tasks or whatever, to get them a little more involved so that we're not in a situation where all of a sudden we don't have anyone leading the team. And I think just generally kind of what I would end on is, for maybe other teams that are kind of struggling with that succession planning, is really figuring out like that pipeline from juniors to women's masters. If there are any kind of like roadblocks there, maybe like conflicting schedules or whatever, and just staying in touch with each other so you know what everyone's doing, so that women's players can get more involved with juniors players and kind of meet them and get to know them. You know, the players on your women's team kind of get to know the women's masters players so they kind of know what that next opportunity is, and just kind of essentially like figuring out what that pipeline looks like to keep people playing.
So Robyn, in your experience, obviously you're in a leadership position now. What were the kind of things that, you know, happened, or the things opportunities people gave you, or things people said to you that kind of brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could pick out like one specific moment, but I think just generally, like, you know, don't assume that someone knows that they might be good at something. Like, I think if I kind of had to pick out, you know, what kind of got me into like coaching or whatever, it was literally my previous captains and coaches going up to me and being like, you should do this, you should be in a leadership position. So I think just kind of not sort of like sitting back and just like assuming that someone will take over the reins, but like if you see someone with potential, go and talk to them and make it very clear to them. Like, I think that's always so appreciated when someone goes out of their way to be like, hey, you would be good at this, or like this would be a good role for you.
Yeah, that's super great, because often people just need to be asked, right?
Yeah.
You never assume that, oh, they wouldn't want to, it's a lot of work, you know, maybe they won't be able to do it. Great. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Robyn. So speaking of being asked and looking after a very large chunk of ultimate organizing, I'm gonna call up Lindsay. You may have seen her from such places as running CUC in Edmonton in 2019. So she's gonna speak a bit about that volunteer portion. So not so much like leadership as well, segueing into that topic, but then also, you know, women's involvement in kind of like a recap of CUC, and then also just volunteering in general and getting those volunteers out. Take it away, Lindsay.
Sure, thanks, Vicki. I do have one slide to share so we can have a change of pace here if I can figure out how to do it. I think it's this one. Are you seeing the CUC organizing committee pictures? Okay, cool. So just same thing as everybody else has said, none of this stuff is a single person effort. So I actually was involved both in 2016 and 2019 running CUCs in Edmonton. The first time in 2016, the bid had been put in and accepted, and then they needed some people to come on board with the committee just to help once we realized actually what a monumental undertaking hosting CUCs is, which I know other people on this call have also been involved in their respective cities. So I was the co-chair in 2016 for running the event, and then in 2019 I did it to myself. I don't know what I was thinking, but we put another bid in, and that time I led the team. And so I was looking back through trying to find some data actually about volunteers and sort of the gender split and stuff like that. And I have information from 2016 and 2019, but I don't have the information for intervening years to give a bit of comparison. So I can really only speak to what happened in Edmonton in those 2 years. But just overall, you know, there's some large scale benefits to hosting CUCs in your city. And one of them, and I think, and this whole conversation, I guess, from my point here, will be sort of looking through a lens of women's programs and women involvement and participation. And so definitely in both years that CUCs with Edmonton, we saw an increase in participation of women's teams and individuals on those teams. So I think both in 2016 and 2019, there were 5 women's teams from Alberta. Oh, I should have counted this up a bit better. Playing, so masters teams, women's division, and junior teams. And in years when CUCs is not as close, those numbers fall. So we are not sending as many individual players or teams from Alberta and Edmonton specifically to CUCs in other cities. As Robyn has said, really illustrated by Prairie. When it's here, when it's close, and then when it goes far away, people are making choices based on individual preference, what their personal goals are, and there's obviously that huge financial barrier to traveling in Canada, as we all know. And then not only with participating in CUCs, but it means that for those years here, the participation in like things like regional tournaments would have more teams vying for those spots. And it made, I think, also in those years, women want to be out practicing with their teams more, so teams can have more consistent practice. So it really, having the CUCs in Edmonton did help with, in that time, peaking sort of that women's involvement in the competitive scene. And then subsequent to that, in those intervening years or after, there is a drop off. So there is sometimes an attitude of one and done. Like, it's here, I'm going to take advantage of that opportunity, but I'm not interested in participating after. And I think that is one of the things, one of the lessons learned from these events, is that if we had thought ahead, maybe if we'd had specifically a women's committee thinking about this about how we're going to leverage this opportunity to get more people playing and then continue those people in leagues or competitive teams or finding offerings that are going to keep them engaged going forward. We may have missed some opportunities with hosting these large events that we could have leveraged into continued participation. But clearly there are some people that got involved in one of these events and then realized that, oh, this is something that I can maybe play at that level, or there's opportunities for me here in the city. So it does open people's eyes or to what is available, what can happen in the Ultimate community. And so that's speaking to sort of people that came out and volunteered. So I did look back at our numbers, and we had approximately sort of 200 to 220 individual volunteers in each of these years. And the split between male and female was pretty much 50-50 in both cases. So a really even parity across who was choosing to volunteer. We didn't collect a whole bunch of demographic data on that, but so that's interesting that, you know, lots of times in other things we'll see not an equal parity of gender, when this is all self-selecting basically, or people asking their friends to come out and help volunteer. And I think one of the benefits of having CUCs is that women or ladies that were potentially league players had never really seen higher level ultimate or even potentially single gender ultimate. So been exposed to a lot of mixed in leagues, and them having been able to come out and see women playing on these teams at all age levels, and, you know, within CUCs, we all there is a skill, like from the sort of bottom teams of the pool or the tier up to the top. So I think in some cases it allowed those volunteers to be like, oh, this is here, this is available, this is something I could do, and being able to see our own Edmonton teams, and especially in 2016, there was quite a lot of success for Edmonton teams. I think that helped people realize what the opportunities were. So those ones that maybe were looking for a more competitive outlet, or coming from other sports, or looking for a community or a team to get involved with, it opened up some opportunities.
Lindsay, losing you a little bit, maybe adjust your a little bit. You're cutting out a little bit every other word.
Sorry about that, everyone. Can you hear me a bit better now? Yeah, weird. Zoom I've always had problems with on this computer. I don't know what it is. Well, I don't know. I will hold my microphone up here. Is that working better at all? Maybe. Sorry, I don't know what it is with Zoom on my computer. Anyway, so it was also interesting to note that as Robyn was speaking about succession, it's the same kind of thing. Like, so if you're going to host a large event or something that you think is going to draw more people to your community, I think we dropped the ball in Edmonton on having that plan for what happens after. So that would be my biggest lesson learned, is that all this effort went into planning and executing and hosting the event, but we didn't have a plan for what to do to keep people engaged following the event. Both, I think, from a competitive team side, so those individual teams thinking about what the future looks like, and from a community side, how do we keep maybe people that are newly exposed to the sport, how do we get them involved, how do we, I guess, make some conversions from the event into having more participants in our league. And then I guess what was really interesting in 2019 is if you look at the picture of the organizing committees, it was all women except for our token male, Giffen, on our organizing committee for 2019. I don't know if this was just a function of the network that we were working in and we knew each other and we had time to do it, but it was pretty amazing to be able to work with such a team of strong female leaders within the community to run this event. And sort of as Robyn said too, these are people that, you know, if you go out and ask because you know they have the skills to do it, it's sometimes harder for someone to say no to you face to face than just a random email or something like that. So yeah, there was a lot of lessons learned from CUCs on other things, but I think in terms of an opportunity to expose more women to the sport and then potentially recruit them or show them what opportunities are available, it is really valuable. But a better plan could have been in place for really leveraging that engagement opportunity in Edmonton. Yeah, I think that's all I really have to say on that right now. So I'll turn it back over to you, Vicki.
Great. Well, you can call me one of your success stories because I moved to Edmonton, I think in 2015 in August. And then that following summer, I volunteered in 2016. And look, I'm now the president of the league. So perfect, great. So now let's take it over to Saskatchewan. So I'll leave it up to the two of you speaking order, whether Bobbi or G, whichever one of you wants to go first, or if you want to kind of tag team it together.
We'll tag team this one together, Vicki.
Perfect.
Sweet. So I think most of you know I'm G. I am living in Regina right now. And what's super cool listening to everybody is that I think we all have the same struggles. And it's kind of neat listening to the different demographics that we're dealing with here and the interest that everybody has and the level of interest they have in Ultimate. Bobbi and I actually started playing together on a mixed team, and this is where Cora began. So Cora started because we wanted to develop our women. That was pretty much what we said. We said, oh, we got a good bunch of ladies over here. Why aren't we trying to make them better? And then boom, we just started this program, and it built from there, from something super small to being a little bubble of competitive women to a larger community that we are trying to keep more women in the game or bring back more women. So I think our part of this conversation is going to be about that, maintaining the women in the game, keeping them engaged, keeping them wanting to come back for more, and giving them different opportunities to do so. Bobs?
Yeah, so when we started Cora, we really sat down. Our first year, actually, we got women together to come to a tournament in Edmonton. So thank you, Winter City Warm-Up. You sparked Cora. So yeah, we went to this tournament with actually some Saskatoon women, and we were like, oh, this is so much fun and like kind of way better. Like we're having way more fun than we do with the dudes. We should keep doing this. And we realized like how more of a rounded players we were becoming, because like I am 5'4" and was suddenly playing deep position, which like would never happen on a mixed team. So that kind of sparked Cora. And then after our first year, we really sat down and we're like, okay, what do we want to make this? Like, why do women play Ultimate? What keeps them here? What do they really want to get out of this program? And so we had a pretty lengthy culture conversation about like, we know that women want to do this because it's fun. They want the community. They want the exercise. Like these are the things that they want out of it. They don't want it to be super stressful. Like this is like their time of their day where they get to chill and like do the sport that they love with the people that they love. So we really were very intentional about building a culture into Cora and figuring out how to uphold that through like turnover and people coming in and out with like pregnancies or like other family obligations. So yeah, that was like the start of Cora, that we wanted to really create a culture.
What was super neat about this culture building was that we weren't just talking your competitive team culture. We were thinking more community based. And in that culture, we really wanted to develop a safe space for women to learn the game. What I find the most difficult in recruiting women to play is that their own confidence in their own abilities stops them from going to the next step. And that's something we all deal with. And that's when you guys were talking about tapping people on the shoulder and saying, hey, you can actually do this. It's something that we have to intentionally do because we feel like we're not confident enough. We're not able to do it, even though we are. And having that safe space to learn, having that safe space to be able to share your ideas with each other on and off the field, I think is super important. I found it super fortunate that our team has a lot of leaders already on it, very natural leaders. And what that kind of built was a lot of learning and a lot of sharing of experiences and knowledge. It wasn't so much that we had to tell people to go help another person. It was more encouragement and saying, yeah, you can do this here. This is a safe spot to do it. And building on that growth helped us kind of get other ladies interested in coming in. It's still something we're still working on, just because it's so hard to let other ladies know that they can do this and they can play. And yes, you can throw down the field, full field, go for it. But it's just about letting them know out loud and keep telling them that, continually telling them these things in this safe environment really helped us get these women back into the game.
So yeah, my experience with Cora, I actually live in Saskatoon now. I was living in Regina when we began Cora, and then decided to make a career change and a city change, so I'm here now. But when I moved to Saskatoon, it's predominantly a mixed city. Like, everyone who plays competitive plays mixed for the most part. There was like a brief flash of a women's team a few years ago, and then that kind of dismantled. And so I got here and I was like, where's all the women's stuff at? Like, there was an indoor league that had been running for a couple years that was kind of petering out because people would come and play, but there was really no coaching. It was really mixed levels. So like, the beginners were kind of frustrated, the advanced players were frustrated. No one was like really having a good time. So that was really something that I noticed, that like G said, the women in Saskatoon also needed a safe place to come and learn. Even if it wasn't going to be a women's team, they at least needed that environment to learn in, which started SWOOP, which is Saskatoon Women Ultimate Players, with an umlaut over the U. That's why it's SWOOP and not SWUP. That's also courtesy of a now Edmonton player. I don't know if she's on here or not. I feel like I saw her. But anyways, our goals with creating that program was giving them a chance to gain skills to increase their confidence. So when they did go back to the mixed game, they had the confidence to actually throw the throw or like make that cut in. So what that program looked like was, the first hour would be skills and development, and then the second hour we would scrimmage. And this year was our second year with it. Our first year we had 40 people sign up, which was amazing for our first year. And then our second year we had 2 nights. We had more of a beginner night and then a more advanced night, and we had 60 people sign up. And then we had 2 sessions and COVID happened. So we didn't really get to see how this year went, but some things that we learned out of that program and with Cora is that, like, and it's been brought up before, like, the face-to-face come and play is way more effective than just like a message or something, because then they can actually bounce their concerns off of you. Like, we had a couple people that were like, oh, I'm not really sure, like, I don't know if I have the skills to do that. And just being able to say, like, yes, you do. This is a completely beginner thing. Like, we're going to teach you the skills. Just come and like try it out. So that was something we learned. And then also just like the importance of having a mentor for women is so huge. Like, if you have someone that you know is invested in your success, like with Swoop or with Cora, your skills are going to skyrocket so much quicker. And you're going to have that person to check in with when you are feeling like you're not really gaining confidence or skills. Like, just having someone else kind of in your corner, we've found really helps people, like, keep people in the game, because we've all had like met the person that started playing because their boyfriend needed another female. And if you don't bring that person in and actually teach them the game, then they kind of tend to peter out because they don't learn skills properly and they're like, oh, this isn't fun, and then they stop coming. So that's been going really well with Swoop, actually getting like some one-on-one time with women to teach them skills and like give them confidence and like kind of just encourage them with their skills, and not just like, you're not just a pylon. You can make that cut. You can make that throw.
Yeah. So adding on to that, I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit of the history of Cora as a team. We actually want to be a program. We're building more towards a club that has both people wanting to develop their skills to a touring team as well. So in the past few years, our membership hasn't really grown immensely. We are a very small community in Regina and Saskatoon, and we have a open team now in Regina, Masters Open, and Saskatoon has a mixed team and 2 mixed teams actually. So we're kind of in a way not wanting to cannibalize the whole community over here and like take people, as some people tend to think, right? So what we're trying to do is just develop skills. How we run it in Regina is during the winters, we run a Sunday night clinic practice, similar to what Bobbi was talking about with swoop. We talk about all our practices. We talk about all our practices together. We kind of discuss how to build the skills during those practices, and then do a scrimmage. What we tend to do is more of a 4v4 style at the end, but a lot of it is skill development during the winter. That is open to everybody. So our year usually looks like winter skill development up until about April, May, when we start to turn our mindset into touring team and kind of getting those women who are interested in doing more competitive play to come out to bigger tournaments. We love Winter City warm-up because we use Winter City warm-up to bring all those women. Because I find it very hard to engage women when you don't show them the real game, especially when they can't play women's in your own city. Playing 5v5 against the same people the whole time isn't the same as going to a tournament where you see all these different women out there doing the same thing as you, and having that tournament mindset and showing them like, this is why we play. I used to say this for the younger ones coming in. I want to give you the bug. I'm just gonna that's it. I'm gonna get you to buy into this so that you do want to come back and that you do want to play more, because tournaments are fun. I think the best part about Ultimate Frisbee is the culture, but the tournament feel that you get. So having opportunities to go to tournaments like in Edmonton, or going to What when it was around, or even Calgary, because we love to promote that stuff, is an awesome way to get women going, oh, they're doing the exact same thing as me? Awesome. Yeah, I want to come back and do this more. But if they see it in only a mixed set, in a mixed point of view, it's very, very hard to get those ladies back, because they still don't think they can do as much as the other women playing. So I found that to be a really big part of what our goal was to help these ladies develop their skills, even if they weren't touring, and to go from there to say, hey, if you want to continue and be part of our touring team, awesome. We travel to tournaments, we do this, and it's a choice that they get to make when they feel more confident in doing so. So that was something that we kind of really put into our team culture, and we put into our communication to the ladies as well.
Yeah, we've really kind of tried to emphasize, like, whatever you put into Cora, like, Cora will put back into you, especially with women. Like, we are typically pretty busy people, especially if you have a family and the summer gets crazy. So what we found helps with lots of our women to commit is if we are more flexible with them, like, we start like, okay, this is what we're asking for commitment, but if you can't make that but still want to play, like, please talk to us. And like, just having open communication with all of our women and checking in with them, and like not just letting them kind of float off of our radar, has made a big difference. Because sometimes people are like, well, I can't commit to that, so I guess I'm out. But if we start that conversation and be like, okay, well, what can you commit to? Because like, we know that life is crazy sometimes, but we still want you to be here. So like, having flexibility with commitments, as long as we communicate, has been really successful for us.
One more thing to add too is that I've noticed, like, just looking at this panel of awesome ladies, is that we all wear different hats in our community, like juniors to university to board members to just coaches to players on our league teams and also touring teams. And the hard part is right now is to kind of separate those hats. And I think Robyn was right with the burnout. It does happen. And keeping those women involved is going to be super important. The fact that we do wear those hats can also tie into how we build our own program. So we have members in our program that run separate things, like Kaylin Berg Flip runs Girls in the Game. And what she's trying to build is a small little Ultimate Frisbee community of little ones. And that's trying to build into Regina Ultimate's youth league, into high school league, into university, where Raynell and I coach at the U of R, and Bobbi has helped out at the U of R, and I think a little bit of help at the U of S. But we're trying to get our team and our members involved in different areas so that we can build something. And giving people roles in these new communities will help develop it. It might be slow, but I feel like in the end, it benefits everybody. Everybody gets to get a taste of what Ultimate Frisbee's like. Women get to see what it's like outside of a mixed game, outside a league, and building skills. Like, I think that's the most important thing, is that we need to advocate for ourselves and advocate for each other and make each other more confident in what we're doing. No matter if it's just league play or if it's all the way up until you're playing touring or national level or whatnot, I still feel like we can all do a great job of just kind of making each other know that we are actually really good at this and can do it. Like, that's the hardest part, I think, out of everything. So
I think the one other thing that we really found is that, like, consistency is very important. Like, at the beginning, we're like, hey, we're having women's nights on Wednesdays, and it would, like, the first few would be like me and G and like one other person. But we're like, well, we still have to have them, because like, what if someone shows up and we're not there? So like, eventually they kept growing, but like, we really had to just like keep doing the little things despite like the low attendance. Like, we had to be consistent with the things we decided to do, so eventually people would be like, okay, I know it's going to be that time. So like, that really helped us a lot too.
And it's adapting. You adapt to whatever you have, and you adapt to your community, because we have a lot of moms on our team. And so how do we adapt to a mother that has to go to work and then has 3 kids to take care of, then goes to practice? Like, we need to be flexible in those situations so that they can come back. Do they want to come back in a different role? Yeah, sure, come back. Just be part of the community and stay involved. And I think having people come and get involved in different ways is going to be the best way to kind of keep them in the game in whatever capacity that they can.
And then how, being that the two of you have played together, we're part of the same city, and now that Bobbi, you've relocated to Saskatoon, how do you kind of see the kind of partnership between cities, right? You're separate, but I mean, it's you've got that connection there, and how do you see that as an advantage to the future of Ultimate in all of Saskatchewan?
It's really exciting to me to come to Saskatoon, where there's so many women that have never played it before but are like getting little tastes of it. Like, they came to Prairie Disc last year, and they've gone to like different clinics or things like that. So like, being in this community, it allows those women to ask me those questions of like, so like, what's Cora up to this year? Like, are you guys going to tournaments? Like, are you looking for players? Like, having a face and like representation in both communities allows us more access to these women that are maybe not wanting to play mixed or like wanting to make a change. It just gives us a little more face time with people, and we've been like discussing how we can make it more into potentially a provincial program where we do have like contingents in both cities, and we're still practicing like as a club, just separately. So yeah, we're trying to figure out how that's going to work, but it's like, it's exciting to start to have people playing for Cora in both cities and like making it work. Because we had 3 Saskatoon players last year.
Yeah, and not gonna lie, prior to COVID, we actually sat down for about 4 to 5 hours to discuss our whole season.
So many good plans.
And then, well, we've kind of thrown that out the window or left it for next year or something. But I think, yeah, we have. But I think it's looking good that we do have representation in both, and it's kind of neat and rewarding to see that our work has kind of built from there, and people know what's going on and people are wanting to try it out. And I think that's the first step in getting more engagement from the women in the community.
And then you can maybe speak a bit about, because Prairie Disc happened last year, which was kind of great, because as a women's team now you have more than an opportunity without having to leave Canada or like go across the country to play in a tournament.
And that was the reason why we wanted to host one, is that we knew that we'd always go to Edmonton. And we also know we have a ton of field space over here, and we decided to host something to see if we can also get some women from Alberta and Saskatoon to come down to Regina to just have a small little tournament and again get a taste for it, because I think that's something that we need more of. We need more opportunities to play women's, to play, or even 4v4 indoor or whatnot, but it's just harder to travel, especially in the winter. But I think Prairie Disc was a great start to that. And we had juniors and open as well. So there was a lot of space and a lot of opportunity for people to come play, which was super sweet because it was right before nationals and it was just a good time.
Yeah. And then you're sort of geographically well placed for like Manitoba there.
Yeah, exactly.
You can just meet in the middle.
It's super good being right in the middle.
Yeah. Perfect. Now we just need to build those bullet trains so we can get there and all practice together. Great.
That'd be amazing.
Comments from Saskatchewan panel?
We're good.
Cool. I want to remind everyone on the call, like feel free if you've got other topics you want the ladies to kind of tackle or questions that you have about the different scenes or the challenges that the different organizations have faced. Feel free to put them right in the chat and then I'll kind of read them out. And I mean, there's been a couple of overriding themes throughout this that I think it's super great. I mean, we didn't exactly go into great detail about what each group was talking about specifically, but I think there's a lot of, things like speaking to people directly to get them involved, that face-to-face time, versus sending an email. That was definitely consistent throughout. And then also, just doing the thing. Sometimes you just have to act and then see what happens, even if it just means 2 people at a practice at first, and then, you build it, they'll come. And then also just to see the evolution, right? Different communities throughout the prairies are different sizes, so we can kind of see, of all the cities, I would say Winnipeg has probably the strongest program, but it's really inspiring for those of us in the other cities to kind of hear about it and see what kind of successes are out there, and seeing an example of it happening and being successful gives us hope that all this work isn't for nothing, that if we just keep plugging away. And I think one thing that Erin said, which was really great, is just being that advocate, whether it's on the league board or just within your community, to just push and get things done and not to give up if there's an obstacle. So maybe we kind of open up the discussion amongst all the panelists for a couple of things. I mean, there's been some discussion about getting people to stick around, getting that FaceTime. Maybe we can kind of tackle some over-broadening things, like say, what from each of you do you think is the most effective or best way to just reach out to that non-ultimate playing person? Most people come into the community either through a friend, or they're kind of like strong-armed into joining a mixed team because they needed the extra female bodies. But say, just somebody off the street, where do you think we could go to try to just encourage more female participation in general? And don't forget to unmute.
I'll start, I guess. We actually with Swoop had quite a few beginners that had like never played before join, and I think that was part of having the safe space of like telling them, we're going to teach you and then you can play, and they could sign up with a buddy. And honestly, just like talking about Ultimate and being super excited about it during most of my life helps. I'm a massage therapist, so I was like telling them about tournaments that I went to, and it was like 2 of my clients that just decided to come and try it because they knew that I was going to be there and they were going to get taught how to do it, and they wanted to try something new. So just being excited about it and explaining what I've gotten out of the community. Like, I have most of my best friends are Ultimate friends, like the things that I've gotten out of it, the community, the exercise, all the benefits that I get, explaining that, and then providing a safe beginner place for people has been super effective.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Bobbi says. that having someone that you know and trust to lead you into the community in the space, I think is really important. So whether it's from some other connection outside of Ultimate, but having that familiar face when you show up as a new person, I think really helps with women in particular, of all age groups, all age categories, so that you're not just showing up by yourself to something brand new, because I mean, that takes a lot of courage, and some people will do that, but knowing that, you know, you can come with a friend or there's someone there that's going to be familiar, I think just helps break down that barrier. And so as leaders in the community, and all of us, I think we all know this, if we reach out to people to ask them, and even if it was a total stranger off the street, at least they knew someone and they were coming with someone that you could strike up a conversation with, right? As opposed to just showing up randomly for a brand new thing that you don't know anything about. And also I think then being really clear, whatever the program is that's being offered. So as Bobbi was saying too, that it was beginners, and it was clear that they were going to be taught how to play so they could do the thing. As opposed to be like, just show up and you'll be fine. So that clear communication of like, what is going to happen when you get to this place, so people know, can have some expectations and are not to be blindsided by like being in a situation where they're uncomfortable.
Have any the groups maybe tried kind of bridging from other sports, like whether, you know, collaborating with, whether it's like an all sports organization or a organization, you know, or like partnering with, you know, a soccer league or like a rugby league or something else to help kind of get that cross sport population?
It was a goal of ours, Vicki, this year to combine that for juniors. Unfortunately, again, timing wasn't great with it, but I think that's a great idea for to do like a cross training, because it introduces other athletes to a sport that we love, and they can still use some of the skills to cross over to their own sport. So the example I have is we were hoping to reach out to the Regina youth football, flag football community to maybe run a practice with them to teach them some ultimate frisbee skills, plus have them have their own practice at the same time. So it would have been like footwork and some throwing, and then that would be it for the like that combo we were talking about. It's an idea I still have in my brain, and I'd love to share with others. We have a ton of women here that play soccer, football, and even rugby. So I would love to reach out to those communities too to try something. And I think a good place to start actually would be university. Just because they're always wanting to try something different, that you might be able to get those ones out too. So something new to try for sure. And it's been an idea in our heads for a while too.
And Terri, you were mentioning like an initiative that you're part of, kind of the female mentoring in sports, but this is kind of a multi-sport event. Maybe now is kind of a good point in time to kind of bring that up.
Put that in, sure. So just to add to that as well, what G was talking about, like we've had a little bit of that as well, the cross-sport, multi-sport stuff with Calgary Ultimate, where we've had like, you know, it's been a little bit organically so far, where say a couple people that play Ultimate are part of a swim club and end up bringing like the bulk of their team out to our Calgary Juniors Ultimate summer program. It kind of also hits a couple birds with one stone in terms of that coming out with a buddy, because they're basically already a social group, and you know, so you don't even have to search for your buddy. They're all coming together already, and the hope is that, you know, further down the line that's still their group, and it's easier to be like, hey, remember that time we all tried Ultimate, let's now put a team into whatever, or sign up as a couple people. So like Calgary Ultimate's also definitely exploring that cross-training multi-sport, and then it ties in super nicely with, you know, the growing body of evidence that really encourages multi-sport kids and all the benefits of not specializing too early. Let's see, I'm still sharing, right? Yeah. This. So I'm actually a volunteer ambassador. They've changed the name. It's like Real Role Model or whatever, with Fast and Female, who's they basically run programs to give girls, I think Bobbi mentioned it, like that whole mentorship with swoop factor. It's doing the same thing, but for girls kind of ages 8 to 16 target, give them some role models, and then also run some multi-sport programs, give them a taste of sports tied in with the skills, like, you know, the sport skills that we learn can take into life. And, you know, it's come up a few times that the importance of that, how much sometimes you have to sort of drag people out because you have to get over that confidence hurdle of I'm not good enough or I couldn't try it or whatever. And kind of, wouldn't it be great if, like, as adult ladies or whatever age, we didn't have to overcome that hurdle? We were already, you know, instilling that from a youth level. All right, let me, oh no. So again, like the stats that Fast and Female, you know, has put out, and that I'm sure you've seen in some other spots, are kind of staggering. They're kind of sad and disappointing. That like over 40% of girls aged 3 to 16 don't participate in any sport. And when you see numbers like that, it's kind of no wonder that as adult, if we're trying to get out adult women, that we're kind of fighting a lot of these things that have been ingrained since youth, and, you know, high dropout rates of girls in sport. So, you know, one, as a side note, I would say for groups like ours, all these engaged people on this call, like, another huge resource I found is reaching out beyond Ultimate. Like, you know, obviously one awesome step is a panel like this. The other one is not reinventing the wheel, and looking to these other organizations for, you know, and those same common themes come up about mentors, safe spaces to fail, how you invite people out, all that kind of stuff. So there's definitely some common threads, and, you know, I'd encourage anybody that's trying to figure out how to do it for your own program to also, like, tap into all these other resources and save having to reinvent the wheel. And actually, we've also linked Kaylin Flip in with Girls in the Game to Fast and Female as well, because they're all kind of very similar missions and visions and messages. Like some of the events I've been part of, you know, we go out to schools or sports groups and run sort of these multi-sport stations, and also a couple sessions on like confidence or leadership, you know, tie in a little session on something like that, a life skill. And, you know, their ambassadors are Olympians and high-level athletes and, you know, just experts in your field. Some of them are, you know, physiotherapists or run yoga studios and things like that. And just getting that representation out in front of girls, and, you know, sort of say taking all the ladies on this call, if we took all these inspiring faces and put them out in front of some girls, like how much easier would some of this whole process get over time? So a lot of organizations out there doing good work. And then I will just shamelessly plug the fact that starting today for a week, they are doing a virtual run, walk, and wheel. They normally run a May girls run out in Canmore, that, again, one of the crossed off the list due to COVID things. So for the next week, you can register if you know of any girls that want to participate. They've got some fun packages for them that get them access to, like, I think a Facebook group where some of the Olympians and some of the athletes like talk with them, and there was some swag. I feel like now the registration's pretty late, but all you ladies can get involved. I'm still working on my goals and plans for the week, so open to challenges. Don't all challenge me or I might be in hard times for the week, but open to creative ideas. So yeah, check them out. I can drop the link into the chat box for the event anyway, but no pressure, but just something fun while we're all unfortunately not at Prairie Disc this weekend, right? It was supposed to be when it was?
Yeah,
It was
this weekend.
Yep. Sure. As Terry's putting that in there, I'm just going to talk a little bit about another initiative that on the EUPA side we tried to kind of get going, but then it kind of was stalled due to COVID. So we actually had the Dodgeball Association reach out to us, and they are also a mixed, like a lot of their recreational leagues are mixed, and they kind of encounter the same challenges that we have about engaging women, having them stay in the sport, not be discouraged and leave, and really grow that that aspect of the sport. And they thought, you know, there was a couple of ultimate players that happened to also be on the board for the Dodgeball Association. And so we were thinking about the potential of a multi-sport tournament. Our contact, he did mention maybe the possibility of like doing a swap, like training a bunch of female ultimate players to play on a female dodgeball team in a dodgeball tournament, and then vice versa, kind of as this experiment to see, you know, how the other side lives, and then kind of bringing that group together. And I think when it comes to that face-to-face engagement, it's like the more faces we get ourselves in front of, the more likely we can kind of spread the word of ultimate and how great it is. So I think it was, you know, a mutually beneficial endeavor, had it been able to happen, to just have more women athletes meet more women athletes, and then be able to kind of, you know, share that enthusiasm for what we do, and hopefully kind of, you know, through osmosis just share. And I think especially on the league and recreational level, there's a lot of folks who just want to play sports as a summer activity with their friends, and that self-improvement may only go so far. Like, I just want to know enough so that I can play and have fun. And that's definitely a huge demographic that, you know, we want to kind of get in front of and get them just playing the sport and making it part of their daily lives. And it's definitely sometimes challenging in that, you know, summer beginner league mixed situation where it's just a lot of friends encouraging friends, and there's not a lot of instruction happening on the field. So it could be a very kind of discouraging experience for someone who's just brand new, and their first you know, exposure to ultimate is where it's not clear what's happening and what's going on, and all of those things. So speaking of that, what do you feel as a group as far as the roles of kind of mixed ultimate, and I'm sure all of us has played probably both mixed and single gender ultimate in our lives, you know, and that kind of relationship between and role of having mixed and single gender in your community, and how that maybe affects or kind of influences that ultimate journey of the kind of female player.
Can I start?
Go for it.
I feel like it is both a positive and a negative depending on the person. Just because if you're an athlete going into a new sport, you're likely to pick that up. But if you're not an athlete, like necessarily a person that's super into sports, but you're just trying something out, I do feel like going into a mixed environment immediately kind of deters you from it if you're not able to pick it up quickly, because it goes pretty quick in a game. It's just like you said, if I went into a game and I told my friend to come, hey, just try it out, but I put them in a mixed game, they're likely gonna not succeed. It's not a great environment to be successful in if it's in a mix, because everybody's goals are different on that field. They're there to play. They're not there to necessarily teach. Whereas if we are encouraging and we're hoping to get these new players out, I think we need to have that safe space for them to do it. And usually it is with all women. It's usually a bit safer to do that unless there's a good environment for a mixed clinic. I do have some friends that have tried ultimate and were just put on a mixed team with a bunch of friends. She hated the sport. She didn't do anything. She just stood there because nobody was really trying to deliberately teach her what to do. They just said, go run there, or go catch it over there, or, you know, get out of the way kind of style. So I see both. I see a benefit for people that are already involved in other sports and can see a game, but I also see it deterring a lot of people that are new to the game and just learning how to play. There's a difference between learning to play a brand new sport and just kind of like, you know, learning to compete. It's so different that we have to be able to figure out what's good for specific people.
I think I'll just jump into, I'm also just reading Greg's comment, which is kind of something that I wanted to mention too. I think this is something that I struggle with a lot because, like, I obviously started playing mixed ultimate, and I think like, and I think I speak from like this is like a privileged perspective that like I never really felt personally like I wasn't a valuable player on my team, but I obviously recognize that that's like not the experience that everyone else has. But I think I struggle with it because sometimes in my mind, I'm like, well, when we're talking about this like future, like gender equitable world, like what's better than having like men and women playing on the same field together and like everyone being like an equal participant like on this team. But the problem right now, obviously, is that it's not equal. And like statistically, women don't get as many touches when they play mixed ultimate. And I think like G was saying, I don't personally have a problem playing mixed ultimate, but I don't think it's the best venue to learn necessarily when you're new to the sport. Like I think you need to get touches, you need to build that confidence instead of maybe being thrown into a mixed game. But then just to Greg's comment, I think also too, when you are in like a mixed play situation, I think, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I think oftentimes like we put a lot of pressure on women to change their behavior in response to something, and to be like, well, like you need to be more assertive. If you make a mistake, like you just need to brush it off. But I think we all have like a responsibility to, in those mixed situations, call out the male players, not in like necessarily like a aggressive or like rude way, but like question their decision making too. Like say, you know, like so-and-so Lindsay was like wide open on that cut and like you shot it deep, like why didn't you throw it to Lindsay, or that kind of thing. Like question those behaviors too. Like don't always just be going to the women on your team and saying like, oh, like you just need to shake it off, like whatever. I mean, that's helpful to an extent, but I think we also need to like question the men's behavior in mixed situations, if that makes sense. And I think also too, like one thing that I'm very conscious of, especially talking to like junior girls, although like not exclusively, but like not letting, like I think as women we're very hard on ourselves, and like not letting your female teammates feel like they're always the ones that made the mistake. Like if they throw like a nice huck and someone else drops it and they're feeling bad, like go up to them very specifically, be like, that was not your fault, like that was a nice throw, it was just a drop. Yeah, I'm kind of rambling now, hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, and then just because not everyone listening to this after the fact will see the comment in the chat. So essentially the comment that Greg made was that given mixed ultimate is still a place where a lot of women play at some point, or have a play in smaller, or have to play in smaller communities, what do your teams / organizations suggest as ways to support development of a welcoming and supportive environment for women in the shared space? And then kind of mentioning that, you know, there's many stories of people just not being, you know, wanting to continue, kind of like G mentioned, the friends that kind of just end up on a team and don't have any direction or instruction and then kind of leave the sport. There's also a comment that came after from Kirsten. If there are women leaders, I think that can contribute to retaining and fostering development and fun for mixed as well. So having those, you know, people who are willing to speak out, like you mentioned, Robyn, right? Now, I know for a lot of communities, even like say for Edmonton, for example, often in the summertime, and I think this was brought up earlier about, you know, spreading people too thin and having a lot of things happening. Maybe Erin had brought it up about the strength of the mixed summer leagues, and then not having room for a lot of single gender programming because all your nights are now booked up with like league games and everything. And then of course, club teams will have their practices, which are a little bit different than someone who say never played before. What are some thoughts for how we can kind of bridge that gap to offer, you know, we've spoken about clinics, but is there kind of other things?
Would I be able to chime in, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. This is something we've advocated for quite a bit, because as everyone saw, like we have a pretty big base. So like a lot of our focus has moved from recruiting and retaining to like getting information out. And one thing we've advocated for lately is with mixed programs, we see continuously these stories. And part of it is an education piece. Nobody's trying to be unequitable and nobody's trying to leave anyone out, especially in a game like ours. So there's a reason that it's happening. So why is that? And it's because our frames of reference are so different. Like I coach shocking, I do other things besides women's development. But when I coach juniors, when I coach the boys, it's different than the girls. And that's because boys will get will be motivated from putting in effort, and girls are motivated to play by feeling accepted. So that's a huge difference. And so something we've suggested, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm hoping that it will, is every year there's captains meetings and spirit meetings, or like rules meetings. So including an education piece in those meetings for like why there's a difference, how you can be more gender equitable on the field, which doesn't mean throw to a girl every second point. That's kind of like condescending to female athletes. So instead, becoming educated on like, oh, you would play better if you felt more accepted. So saying hi to everyone, talking to people, things like that. There's a couple courses online beside, like where you do the respect for sport one. There's one that's including keeping girls in sport. That's huge. And I've encouraged all of the male coaches that I go with to like hit that course, because it gives a lot of why women and men are different. And then men don't know, like they just know how they play and how they see the field. So how can this person be different? Oh, well, here's how, and here's how we can make it fair. And I say the same thing to the girls. Girls, the boys are just waiting for you to get in there because that's how they learn. And they're like, oh, okay. So it's having that education piece, and there's a few places we can put that. Captains meetings, AGMs, things like that. That's it.
Yeah, and just speaking to that a little bit too, Erin, I had an interesting experience, actually. I think it was maybe last summer. So I was like Robyn, when I learned to play Ultimate, I'd come from another sport. I felt fairly comfortable. I didn't feel that I had any issues playing in mix. I could hold my own ground there. I went to sub in someone's league team last summer, and I'm like a fairly competent Ultimate player. And there was quite a few times that I didn't get thrown to, but I was wide open. And so I finally like went up to the person and said like, hey, you know, I feel that I'm open. Why are you not throwing to me? And he's like, oh no, that your mark is like quite close to you. And we actually had a really good conversation about, for women, or for me, I'm like, I'm still open even though she's that close. Whereas, and I know me, I have to adjust when I'm throwing to men, like sometimes at closing distance. And we're just coming from two very different perspectives. And that conversation helped both of us understand what was happening. And then this person actually started throwing to me, and like it was proven right then that like, no, I'm still open even though you thought I wasn't, just based on your knowledge of playing with more men or maybe faster people or whatever the case was. So I think that education piece, and maybe speaking to Greg's question too, like if you see things happening, just have that conversation about like, well, why are you choosing not to make this choice in this game? And maybe there's just a misunderstanding or those different frames of reference. As you're saying, like we see things from different perspectives. So as leaders, both male and female or whatever on your team or experienced players, just having those conversations with teammates about like, you know, why do you feel you're not getting the disc, or why are you not throwing to that person, or how, you know, what are you seeing in this situation, can sometimes clear up that stuff right away.
And it's also, you know, understanding like the different play styles of all people, right? If you come from a different team that plays differently, so then it's just communication throughout amongst all players is always better than assuming, oh, they're just not a nice person, that's why they didn't throw to me, right? Or because they're just being gender biased or what have you. Great. Any other questions and perspectives? Yes.
Vicki, can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I just want to change that mindset now. So we've been talking about that communication piece, but I also do think it's about helping these ladies build their skills so that they can go up to a person and say, yeah, you can throw to me because I'm capable, I can do it, I have the ability to do it. A few years ago, that's why we ran a women's clinic to talk about equity and to talk about women in the game and have these conversations that we're having right now. Because I found it very difficult to say, hey, I want you, the new player, to go up to that person who totally looked you off and say something to them when you don't really know the game. So the clinics I think we're running are going to be a good foundation for these people to go into the sport and be like, yeah, you should have thrown to me. I can do that. I can catch the disc. And then also understanding, why are we having these conversations? So using the clinics to educate our female community is super important. And something I found too with some of the answers I got from the junior girls in that clinic, they were saying that it was super helpful to have a male leader advocate for them as well. So like they, Regina Ultimate runs a lot of their clinics, and their coaches are basically me and Bobbi and everybody else usually, and James Topinka. And James did a great effort to have these conversations with the boys and the girls about it, because he wanted to make sure that everybody knew that this was something that we were all trying to strive for, and it wasn't just going to be a huck game to a boy, and to use everybody on the field. And he made it so that the goal was for everybody to be able to play and to be accepted into the game. And the girls found that super helpful. So I think as captains, as leaders, male or female, being educated, just like Erin said, and doing and having these conversations is the best way to kind of advocate for others, especially beginners in the game. And that's going to be, it's going to be a tougher part for a lot of different tiers, because I feel like the lower we get, the goals are different, right? And that's the hardest part. But if we're here to advocate, if we're leaders out there and we see something happen, that's when we can help the ones that are less confident and don't have the skill just yet, and then help them build those skills so that they can go and say that. Because that's the hardest part, is going up to a person saying, dude, I can do this, throw me the disc. So yeah.
Can I add on to that a little briefly? Okay, an experience I had at the Ultimate Canada Conference with one of the Saskatoon Ultimate board members who's a male. We were at the cause presentation, and it was basically, she was giving the women a time to speak about ways they felt trying to step into leadership positions, or just like their kind of barriers to volunteering and all of the thoughts that go on and the resistance we have to some of those things. And he actually said to me after, he's like, it was so helpful hearing women explain how they were feeling. He's like, I've never heard those perspectives before. Like, so often we have our gender equity conversations as a group of women, or we have them as a group of males, and we don't have the conversations where the males are sitting and listening to how the women feel and their perspective. So it was just really interesting, him adding on that he's like, having that conversation as a group with both genders involved was super helpful for him.
Definitely thank you to, everyone who's come out to this presentation, including like the males who are like, oh, I see women's ultimate panel, and didn't immediately think, oh, not for me, because that's not about me, right? To kind of join in the discussion, because it affects our whole ultimate community, which is really great. So I just want to remind everyone, we do have a survey link there. It's a Google form, so you just have to click on it and then fill out the questions. It'll help us kind of either organize another one of these in the future if you had a really great time and you want to have more of these, or even more opportunities to just gather as a group and hear different perspectives from different cities, or if there's topics that we didn't get around to that you would like discussed, and then, or even just other future programming that you would like EUPA to put on. We're kind of pretty much right on time here. It's at our 2-hour mark, so that's perfect. Is there any closing comments or final words from each of our presenters? I think we've had a really great discussion on, and I think the biggest takeaway, I think for myself, is just that a lot of things that are happening in other cities are the same things that are happening where we are. And it's just really great to be able to like share in that experience and also share solutions as well. Because, sometimes it feels like when you're just putting in all those volunteer hours, you feel like you're just trudging at it alone and you don't see the results necessarily immediately. And it could be, very, make you want to give it up, right? So it's good that like all this good work that everyone's been doing is, is helping, and it's and people appreciate it. So thank you so much, panelists, for joining I don't know if it's the first ever. I haven't been around long enough to know, but at least for EUPA hosted Prairie Women's Ultimate Panel, and participating in the discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thanks.
Let's do it again. So hopefully we'll see you all soon.
Yeah.